Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Birds Pregame Live, presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. Today, go West, Philadelphia Eagles. I suppose if Greg Lewis and LaRaven Clark were still on the team, guys, I could crack some pretty good Westward expansion jokes here, but I'm just going to save everybody from doing that. The Eagles are on the road today, all the way out in the West Coast, to play a surprisingly decent Los Angeles Rams team at SoFi Stadium. I believe this is their first look at SoFi Stadium, a multi-billion-dollar stadium that I was told, Adam, has no air conditioning. Is that a thing in LA where you don't need air conditioning?
They must have some kind of air in there. I guess they could keep it at a climate controlled 68 degrees, but nevertheless, yeah, you're right. This is their first adventure in there.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a chance for the Eagles to go 5-0. I'm, of course, Geoff Mosher, alongside my Inside the Birds co-host, Adam Caplan. Joining us, we've always got him. It's our tape breakdown mastermind, Greg Cosell. And joining us shortly, because the man is always in transit, coming back from that Michigan-Minnesota game yesterday, will be former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant. Just like I'm clapping for Jason Avant just to be able to make this show and be able to do sideline radio the day before for the University of Michigan. I'm sure he'll be excited to come on with us soon. Now, the Eagles have some warts, but they are just one of two unbeaten NFL teams entering Week 5, having beaten NFC East rival Washington Commanders in overtime last Sunday, 34-31. Meanwhile, fellas, the reports of the Rams' demise has been premature. LA is 2-2, coming off an overtime win themselves against the Colts. Both of their losses have come to pretty good teams, the Niners and the Bengals, and both by one possession. They are not an easy out today for a Birds team that continues to have to overcome its own injuries. We'll talk about that. We'll get into it all. We'll break it down. While you're enjoying the show, please share it and like it on whatever platform you're viewing it on. If it's YouTube, please hit that subscribe button for us. We greatly appreciate it. And if you submit a question in the YouTube chat box, we'll be sure to get it answered. And we'll also try to read out any of your score predictions live during the show. If you have a question, you want to direct it at me or Greg or Adam or Jason, go ahead and do that. And we will definitely try to get into that. I want to start off the show, guys, with a little bit of a big picture look here, as we always do, before we get into the game breakdown. So, Greg, the 49ers and the Eagles are the NFL's only unbeaten teams. Do you see them, because you watch everybody on tape, do you see them as clearly the two best teams in the NFL from a tape watching standpoint, or do you think that there's a couple of teams out there that are still just as formidable? Where are you seeing this NFL landscape through about a quarter of the season?
Well, I'd say this week they look like the two best teams in the NFL. You know, last week the Dolphins were the best team in the history of Western civilization as we know it. So, you know, I think you have to kind of wait and see and let things play out. The point is they're both very, very good teams. You know, are they going to lose a game? Sure, that's going to happen. And, you know, they may lose a game and not look great doing it. You know, you never know. Injuries play a big factor as the season progresses, but you're dealing with two really solid teams. So yeah, they're you know, those are always hard questions because you have a whole season to play, Jeff, and you know how that goes. I mean,
yes.
But yeah, it's not likely that either one of those teams is going to hit a prolonged losing streak or be bad over a long stretch of time. But it is the NFL, and teams have bad games or lose games, and then everybody in the world in which we live, as you know, reassesses. Look, we have a game going on now where the Bills are losing players, big time important players. I thought earlier this week, I thought the Bills would lose today, and then they could well lose today. And after last week, everybody said they were the best team, you know, coming down the pike. You know, all this changes week to week, but solid teams tend to be solid teams over the course of a lot of games.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing we can say about the Eagles and the Niners, well, first for the Eagles, that whole Super Bowl hangover thing, they've got warts, but clearly they did not let losing the Super Bowl impact them so much that they couldn't figure out a way to win and close out games. So they've done a good job with that.
You know, I will say one more thing, if I could, Jeff. Just one thing that I think is really impressive about the Eagles, and I think it's important going forward, is I think to be a really, you're talking about high-level teams. Obviously, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl a year ago, and the goal this year is not only to get back, but to win. But the bottom line point is to be a really good team consistently in this league, you need to have more than one way to win. And I think the Eagles have proven through the early part of this season that they can win more than one way. And I think that's ultimately an important thing. If you can only win one way, or based on, let's say your quarterback just playing well, and if he doesn't, you don't play well, then you're going to have games where that doesn't happen and you don't play well.
100%. And, to the point on the two teams there going into the year, I think most people felt the NFC was going to be either San Francisco or Philadelphia, maybe a Detroit, but a lot of people said San Francisco, Philadelphia, and it's certainly shaping up to look that way. Jason, I couldn't ask this question to you at a much better time. It was about the Eagles traveling from one coast to another and what kind of impact that takes. And you literally, I think you're in the airport right now, just getting back from. Now, were you in Michigan or Minnesota, or were you transferring somewhere? Where are you coming from?
Yeah, Minnesota. So Minnesota, we played that late game, 7:30 game, and there's not many flights back out. And so I had to get on the first flight in the morning and got up at 4:30 to get to Newark. And now I'm at a Hampton Inn in a business center. So making it work.
Well, I think I wanted you to tell that because I just want our viewers to know how dedicated to the cause you are. So we really appreciate that. I'd like to interview your knees about a traveling cross country. No, just tell us what it's like. The Eagles have to go fly across the country. They're banged up. They got guys who are playing through injuries. Is that 6-hour flight a difficult thing? I know there's been sort of modifications on when teams leave as far as what day they leave and how much time and the whole time difference. What's that like?
It's a pain in the neck because your sleep schedule is thrown off. And also, in order for it to be really effective, you have to change your practice schedule the days prior to that. So that week you want to practice around the same time that you're going to play. And it's very hard because you're on East Coast time, and most coaches don't want the inconvenience of that. So it's hard, and you're groggy after that long flight. Most of the time, you're dehydrated. So usually teams do well. The home team normally does well in that type of situation. So, but I think the Eagles are so much more talented than the Rams that I don't think it'll be a problem. But yes, it can be. I've never felt great traveling to the West Coast.
Hey, I want to walk you down memory lane real quick. I think you were on the team where John Runyon, he fell out of a cold tub in Philadelphia, broke his coccyx, which if people don't know, that's your ass bone basically. And then a couple of days later, you guys had to fly all the way out to San Francisco. Didn't you have to stand up the entire flight?
Yeah, John Runyon is one of the toughest players. He had to play, I think, the last 6 games or so, and the playoffs with a broken butt. And so yeah, and he had to fly, and he could sit down just for the takeoff because he was required by the stewardess, and then he would stand up the entire way until we were about to land. And that he did that the entire time. And
that's
we
made
5.5
hours, Jay, man. That's a lot of time.
We had to go to Dallas. He was like that, and he played through it. And we gave him a memorial handrail at the Eagles facility, Novacare Center. It's still there today. John Memorial handrail that goes into the cold tub, because only the most unathletic guy is going to fall and going into the cold tub.
Yeah, definitely. We actually thought it was a lie to make up it. No, it was actually true. He really did fall out of the cold tub. But he would tell us, Jay, that the least amount of pain he was in during the week was when he was playing football on Sunday. So that gives everybody an idea of how much of a warrior and an Iron Man he is. Yeah. Adam, back to the game, the big picture look. He was facing Sean McVay. They've been able to beat Sean McVay before. He then came back to the Link a couple of years ago and stuck it to him. But where is Sean McVay right now? And seeing how the Rams were kind of counted out, but they're 2-2. They play tough. Where is he on your kind of pantheon right now of NFL head coaches?
First of all, what's interesting? He seriously thought of walking away and going to television. Amazon was going to make him an offer. Other networks were interested in him, and he decided to come back. He loves coaching. And the thing was, though, they made this football operations decision that they were going to get younger. You were to clear out cap space and cash, go this younger group of players, and it's kind of revitalized them. I know it's not the most talented team, but just being around them for 2 days in training camp, they kind of embraced this new look, but they've got Stafford, still with them as quarterback. We'll talk about him later. I think he kind of enjoys this because no one thought they could be competitive this season. And as you said at the start of the show today, they're 2-2. No one expecting to do that. The Niners kind of handled them. The score was actually closer than the game really was. They scored it with the last possession of the game to make it closer. But the bottom line is they're a little bit more competitive. And offensively, they're getting Cooper Kupp back, which we're going to talk about today, a little bit later. This is a team that could give the Eagles a game today. I'm not saying that the Eagles won't win it, but this is a team that offensively could do a lot.
Absolutely. We are going to get into that. And your point about Cooper Kupp segues really well into our injury reports, because this is yet another guy, I think a couple weeks in a row now, where you look at the Eagles injuries, you look at the opponent's injuries, and you say, man, the Eagles are a little bit more banged up at key spots than their opponent is, which has not been the case the last 2 years. So let's get into that. We know Avante Maddox continues to be out indefinitely with the pec tear that he had. Nakobe Dean, linebacker, will miss the 4th of 4 games of short-term IR. So the Eagles are hopeful that he will be able to be activated, I imagine, into the 21-day window, which would start next week when they reconvene for practice. We'll see what happens. His spot continues to be filled by Nick Moro, who had 3 sacks last week. We'll get into that a little bit. Obviously, Avante Maddox's absence has had a widespread impact on the secondary, and we'll get into that as well. Also out today, defensive tackle Fletcher Cox. He had gotten an epidural during the week, but he is going to miss the game dealing with that back injury. That's a tough loss for the Eagles. However, they are deep on the defensive line. If there's one spot where maybe they can survive having a big injury, it's there. We would expect Milton Williams and rookie Jalen Carter to get a few more snaps along with the other guys in the rotation. And of course, right guard Cam Jurgens was who we knew got hurt, came out of the game last week. He's going to miss at least, not just today, but at least 3 more games with that foot sprain, as he went on also the short-term IR. And Sua Opeta will continue to replace him at guard. The team felt he played really well in Cam Jurgens' spot, but now he is going to be a starter for quite a while. And the big question, Adam, is what happens if Jason Kelce were to get hurt, because Cam Jurgens was not only the right guard, but he was the backup center, and the Eagles are unusually light at that position now.
Yeah, it would either have to be Jack Driscoll, who took center snaps in college, and Dickerson obviously was a center in college at one point. That's it. They're the only choice that they have. Obviously, they're hoping that Kelce doesn't miss any snaps. Well, you look at that, and Geoff, you mentioned the Cox injury. Not only is he out, but Marlon Tuipulotu is out with a triceps injury. That's never good. That worries me. That would be multiple weeks. And Sidney Brown, by the way, did not work at all this week, so he is out because they had hoped, Geoff, that he could take some slot snaps when he's available, but he'll miss a 2nd straight game. So, yeah, depth is an issue today. Now, the good thing is, Geoff, they had 7 D tackles on the roster, which is unheard of. So they'll have 5 available. You would think Moro Ojomo would dress today for the first time in his career as a 5th tackle. And then we're also going to see Bradley Roby, Geoff. We're going to see Bradley Roby, who was called up. He was elevated for this game, which we thought probably would happen.
Right.
We'll see how many snaps he can handle. By the way, Rashad Penny was added Saturday with an illness as doubtful, so he won't play today. Not that he would dress anyway. They'll have their 3 backs now that Boston Scott's back. He was back last week.
Right. As you mentioned, Bradley Roby signed earlier in the week to play cornerback, most likely slot corner. You'll think because he's active, he will take most, if not all, of the slot cornerback reps. Now, the Eagles are getting back Justin Evans, who was out the last 2 games, I think. He is back, and he has played nickel for the Eagles in a big nickel look. Greg, I wanted to ask you about Bradley Roby, not just earlier in his career, but even most recently with the Saints. What kind of corner are we looking at right now?
Well, Roby's undergone kind of a transformation in the league. When he came out of Ohio State as a 1st-round pick, he had high-level traits. As an outside corner, that's what he played at Ohio State. And, he was one of those guys, long, athletic, sudden, twitchy, played outside most of his career. The last couple of years with the Saints, he essentially has been a slot corner. And we'll get into that, why that's increasingly important today. But, he's been a slot corner the last couple of years. And in a Dennis Allen defense, a slot corner has a lot of responsibility and a lot of things that he needs to deal with, as most slot corners do. But in a Dennis Allen defense, there's a lot there. So it's really important for him, hopefully, to be able to play quite a few snaps today, because the Rams are a very, very high percentage 11 personnel offense. They play almost exclusively with 3 wide receivers. And with Kupp being back, that's not likely to change.
No, it's not. So that is a real matchup that we will get into today. Last but not least for the Eagles, they did elevate their punter, Braden Mann, from the practice squad. It's the third and final time they can do that. So unless they want to sign a new punter to the practice squad this week, they're going to have to sign Braden to the 53-man roster to make him, if they want him eligible to play, and then obviously make a corresponding roster move. Although with Juergens going on IR, that might have already, because I don't think that they've made a roster move at him since. So that might be the switch off there. Juergens on IR, and then they sign Braden Mann to the 53. We'll talk about that more as the week progresses. And the Eagles got a nice dose of good news over the last few days, as Britton Covey is out of the concussion protocol. He was questionable, but now he carries no game status designation, and he's good to go, along with wide receiver Quez Watkins, who had missed the last 2 games from a hamstring injury. So the Eagles a little bit deeper at wide receiver and on special teams because of that. Good news for them. As for the Rams, so again, not too many major injuries. Now, Joe Noteboom is going to be out with a groin. He is their right guard. So in his place, do they go with Alaric Jackson, Adam, or does he start at a different spot?
Yeah, so basically this season, it's interesting. So they moved Joe Noteboom, who was Andrew Whitworth's replacement at left tackle. He signed a big extension, moved him to right guard. And he unfortunately is out today. So they've got a couple things that they're going to do here. Now, it depends on Alaric Jackson. Jackson was moved to left tackle this season, number 77.
Yeah.
He was an undrafted free agent 2 years ago. He's questionable. If he doesn't play, it'll be Warren McClendon, who's a 5th rounder. He would start, and it's definitely going to be Kevin Dotson. Dotson, who they acquired from the Steelers in a trade, will start for Noteboom again. So this crushes their depth. And if they got to go with a rookie left tackle, that's great news for the Eagles. So look, their offensive line's overachieved this season. It has not been as bad as some people thought it would be, but they've got a challenge here today going against this Eagles front.
Just keep one thing in mind. Noteboom played left tackle last week.
Oh, did? Okay.
The entire game. And actually...
Right, I noted that. Yeah, was he filling in, or was they moving him there?
You know, one can have a debate about the Eagles D-line versus the Colts D-line. One would argue the Eagles D-line is better, but the Colts D-line is not bad. And Noteboom actually played exceedingly well a week ago, and they did not give him much help at all, and he held up really, really well against the Colts. So that's a big loss for them, because he was actually replacing Jackson, who had been the starter at left tackle. So now they're down to their 3rd left tackle, basically. So we'll see how that plays out. That's not a good sign.
No. Now, what is a good sign for the Rams, fellas, is that wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who had started the year on, I believe, injured reserve, right? He had the hamstring injury, which, as Adam has pointed out, was a hamstring and a little more. Well, he practiced this week. He was activated off IR, and he will play. The Colts have said he's definitely going to play. We remember Kupp leading the NFL in 2021 in receptions and receiving yards. He is a major threat for the Rams pass offense. We'll get into why in the mismatches a little later. Adam, what did you know about that injury that kept him out? Because you were saying it's not just a hamstring.
Yeah, he saw a specialist because there was something else associated with it. And the good thing is it wasn't like it was a 10-week injury. So he took a lot of reps this week, and he's good to go. I wouldn't surprise me if he played over half the snaps. And we're going to get into the matchups. It just makes the receiver group that much deeper. In fact, when we had John D. Flippo on, the former Eagles quarterbacks coach for our Patreon people, John talked about the difference between the Shanahan offense and this McVay offense. Are completely different in terms of personnel usage. And I'm fascinated to see how the Rams attack the Eagles secondary, because we know the Eagles have some challenges here. Look, it is what it is. It's not like McVay doesn't know this. He knows it because he watched the tape, and they had some communication issues on the back end last week.
Jason, we'll get into the matchups on that in a second, but I just want to know from your perspective, a guy playing the first game of the year, coming off of what Adam just discussed on the hamstring and a little bit more, what is reasonable to expect for him to play as far as a number of snaps, and how much do you expect him to look like the Cooper Kupp of 2021?
Well, it all depends on what level of hamstring it was. Every guy is a little bit different, and every guy's pain tolerance is a little bit different. Now, if he's out there, I'm pretty sure that he's not fearing that he's going to, tear it again. So we can expect an effective player. Will he be in mid-season form? No, but you don't have to be in this offense for receivers. Like me looking at the tape the last couple of games, they still do the same things. They're in a bunch of stacks. They're in a lot of motions that are getting guys in off coverage, which is giving guys free releases down the field. Therefore, Puka and Tutu Atwell, all of these guys can get free and open space and catches. So you don't have to be at peak condition in order to thrive at receiver. They have a bunch of guys that probably wouldn't play in other systems because of this type of system that they're playing on.
Gotcha. All right. Look forward to getting into that down the line. Any other stuff with the Rams is basically some guys who are banged up, including Matthew Stafford, who got his hip banged up against the Colts. X-rays came back negative. He's good to go, expected to play. Same thing with Kyron Williams, their running back, also got his hip banged up, expected to play. Tyler Higbee, who has been a nemesis for the Eagles, hurt his thumb. He's expected to play. Out today doubtful is Desjuan Johnson, the rookie defensive end.
Yeah. I mean,
he only played 10 snaps this year.
He doesn't.
It's not a big deal.
No, they're good to go. Otherwise, it's going to be fascinating because you've got issues. Both teams have some injury issues. It's just there's obviously some matchup challenges that the Rams have to handle the Eagles front. So I'm really looking forward to that.
All right. Before we get to today's matchup, we have to look back a little bit. The Eagles secondary did have some issues against the Commanders pass offense last Sunday. And as we were mentioning, the Rams happen to do some similar things offensively to what Washington does. So let us start with the secondary, the defensive backfield. We've already touched on it for a variety of reasons. There were some moving parts, communication, etc., whatever you want to say. Eagles corners had some trouble last Sunday. Darius Slay in particular did not play his best game. So let's get into the why of that, Greg. What did you observe on tape that seemed to give the Eagles some issues on the back end? What was their confusion or their issue there?
I mean, you hit it. I don't think Slay played particularly well last week. And, when your so-called best player on the back end does not play well, it's going to magnify your issues. So, going forward, and Jay can speak to this, do we think Darius Slay has lost his ability to play well, or did he just have a bad game? He was particularly poor on that final touchdown drive. He was playing a ton of off coverage, and there were a lot of balls caught in front of him. So unless we think that Slay can't play anymore, you have to assume that he's going to play better as an individual. I thought that Sam Howell actually played a really, really good game. I thought that he was strong in the pocket. One of Howell's strengths, and it showed up again, even though they lost on Thursday night, is that he is willing to stand and in a muddied pocket and allow things to really develop. And the longer you're in the pocket, the tougher it is for your secondary. Now, I personally think the fact that they have Bradbury playing in the slot is a little bit of an issue. And so do they, obviously, because they signed Bradley Roby. They wouldn't have signed Bradley Roby if they didn't think that was an issue. They told us they have an issue.
You got that out of that, Greg? That's good deduction.
Yeah, they told us. Adam knows how I feel about that stuff. Teams tell you how they feel about players. Yes. We don't have to guess a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Right. So, and particularly for this upcoming matchup, which we'll get into in more detail because of the way in which the Rams play. But, so they've got issues on the back end with Bradbury, who's not a slot corner. I still don't think Josh Joe played poorly. Obviously, he gave up the final touchdown. Look, Slay played left corner the entire game until the final 2 snaps. And obviously on the final snap, Dotson caught the touchdown. They were playing way off, and they were pretty much allowing, and by the way, Slay was playing way off on the right side as well. They were allowing the receivers to run into the end zone. You can debate whether that's the right approach or not. Jay, I'm sure, will have a point of view on that. But they were allowing the receivers to run into the end zone unencumbered. So,
yes.
That's a philosophical debate as to how you should approach that. But, I think that from a secondary perspective, with Bradbury having to play a position he's never really played in the league, they've got some concerns.
Yeah, Jay, I wanted to sort of funnel that to you because, hey, listen, anybody who listened to or watched Q&A this past week already knows how Jason and Quentin felt about the defensive structure on the last drive and the last play of regulation. But I thought that Slay's first 2-3 games of the year were pretty good. So I with Greg saying, like, obviously, if you have a bad game, it's either one of two things. All of a sudden he's losing it, or maybe there was some reluctance on coverage or what they were going against. Do you think all that moving around and Bradbury having to play in the slot just sort of changed the mindset of the secondary? Because I remember you and I talking earlier in the year too. We thought sometimes the corners were doing a good job of getting up on receivers when it was week 1, week 2, week 3. What changed? Was it the injuries?
Well, there could be injuries, right? But also it's the familiarity on the back end. You got guys in different spots. You don't have your starting safeties in. You got guys at different positions, and now you may feel like you have to take on more responsibility than you actually have, which causes you to be a little bit reluctant to come up. And also, it's a new defensive coordinator. There are going to be game plans that maybe a veteran player, and this is very, very hard for a veteran player sometimes to get a new defense coordinator. He's asking you to play things a little bit different, and maybe it doesn't work out, that way. So there's a bunch of different reasons. We're all going to speculate on what it could be. From what I see on the film, just like Greg said, he's been off and allowing things that he normally doesn't. I know that Terry McLaurin has had some really good games versus Slay, and it could be that particular matchup. And remember, that's how the NFL is. Darius Slay could go out and shut down Devontae, Adams, but have struggled against Terry McLaurin. That's how it is. The game is like that sometimes. Some teams struggle against other teams. Some teams struggle against other players, and there could be something there. But let's see it going forward with the team cohesive, guys not injured, trying to figure out, the new defensive coordinator and how he likes to play things. So I don't know if Slay is responsible for getting up closer or the defense coordinator is telling him to get back a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, right. That's a great point. And, and the other thing, Jeff and Adam and Jay, is, sometimes plays are made. I mean, there was a big time throw and catch on the first possession by McLaurin. It was a back shoulder throw by Howell. It was an outstanding contested catch by McLaurin. Job was right on him. So, I mean, do we say Job played it poorly? He didn't play it poorly. It was just really good. Job on the first possession had an outstanding press man rep versus McLaurin. And the result of the play was a 3-yard scramble by Howell. I'm sure a lot of people didn't see that. When you watch tape, you see that. He was all over McLaurin. He was all over Samuel on another play where they played a specific kind of coverage. That happened early in the second quarter, and McLaurin actually caught a 24-yarder, but Job was locked on Samuel on that particular play. So, there's a lot of things that happen in a game. We respond to the results, and obviously there's reasons for the results, but it's always easy to say that, the secondary was bad because the quarterback threw for yards. You have to see the plays. Sometimes guys, Terry McLaurin, the Commanders have 3 really good receivers, and sometimes they make really good plays. They make contested catches, and that happens in the NFL. And by the way, there's a lot of teams that will put their X receiver out there. He's the single receiver to the short side of the field, and they expect him to make contested catches. That's why he's an X receiver, because those are the kinds of things that happen with an X receiver. So, to me, the slot is the biggest issue, and that's the reason they went out and they signed Bradley Roby. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Here's one thing that I want to, follow up with Greg, and I totally agree with him when it comes to, like, Eric Bieniemy ran very similar plays that I've seen most of my career, bringing guys down in short stacks and bunches. And what that does is it causes the back end to have a plan. Are we going to go top? The lower guy's going to take the guy furthest away from the line of scrimmage. If they go left or right, are we going to in and out it? Am I going to go across? And you saw Slay get beat on a few of those things because there's guys in position that are normally not there. So they don't have that communication factor in order to sift through that information. And so at the end of the day, all we know is Slay got beat. But the truth of the matter is they didn't have the proper protocol and system in place because of a new coordinator and also new guys in those spots.
Yeah, I think to your point, Jay, the lasting image that people have from that game is, I think it was on the game time drive for Washington where it looked like there was a bunch formation to the right and Bradbury not switch off, and it wound up that Slay's covering nobody, Bradbury's covering the wrong guy, and I think it was Diami Brown wide open up the right side for 25 yards, and that looks like everybody stinks, but it's really, to me, it looked like communication was not there, and it goes back to what we're saying about the slot and the experience. So, Adam, two things on that, right? Like, two things are, one is that if you're Sean McVay, you watch that, and even if you got Bradley Roby or whoever in the slot, you still think this is probably an area for what you do offensively that you want to attack, because that's what the Rams do anyway. And two, I wonder if Justin Evans is a little bit of an insurance policy today, because as much as they're happy, I guess, with what they saw from Bradley Roby's conditioning this week, I mean, they just signed him off the street. I don't know what they can expect there.
Yeah, and again, he's got to learn the way that the Eagles play slot may be different than the way that the Saints do it. So they have to see. Now, the good thing is, Geoff, they only worked him. The only player they worked out this week was Roby. They did that Tuesday. He looked good. They signed him Wednesday. He got the Wednesday walkthrough, the two practices, yesterday's walkthrough before they flew out yesterday. But they're going to put him in there. He's going to play today. What the only thing that we don't know is will he play outside at all? Will he just play inside? That's something we don't know. We'll obviously learn that today. But they're a little bit short. The communication, all these changes, Geoff. McVay knows all this, and they're coming here. I mean, now with Cooper Kupp back, you're going to see that. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do to counter, because the side knows this. He knows what their issues are, and so does McVay. And it's big coaches versus coaches here. It's fascinating. Yeah,
no, it's going to be a very interesting chess match. And obviously in chess, Adam, you've got a lot of different pieces and a lot of different weapons at your disposal. One of the weapons for the Rams today is a rookie that very few people had heard of going into the season. 5th round pick, wide receiver Puka Nacua. Did I pronounce that correctly, everyone?
Correct.
Puka Nacua?
Yes.
Puka Nacua. Right, out of BYU, that wide receiver powerhouse, BYU. He's off to a record-setting start. It's sort of amazing to see his name right there with some of the NFL's most recognizable names at the position. He's got 39 catches. That is tops in the NFL, or at least it was going into week 5. And right there with Justin Jefferson, just a few yards shy of Justin Jefferson for number 1 in receiving yards. So it's the most ever for a rookie receiver through 4 weeks. And he's only the second player in NFL history to have 100-yard receiving games in 3 of his first 4 games. You guys raise your hand if you had that on your 2023 Rams bingo card. You guys all had that? That's what I thought. All right. Adam, you were at the Senior Bowl. Was he there, and did you notice anything about him in that week?
Yeah, he was on they call it National American team. He was on the national team, and he blew it up that week. But despite all that, I don't see, usually if you do well in the Senior Bowl, you go on the combine. He was not invited to the combine. So the word that I got, he was a Washington transfer to BYU, is that though he really known in coaching world for running after the catch, he's not really explosive. He's just really good at open space and finding it. He still should have. I mean, I get it. He's not fast. The tape shows that. But how in the world this guy was not invited to the combine is beyond me. That obviously is an egregious error that he should have been. And I think you said it earlier. Maybe not everybody that the Rams have would be good in other systems, but he's fantastic at it. And the word around the team is that he got their offense right away, super smart. And that really means a lot to McVay, because he could be hard on young players, and this certainly worked.
Yeah. So obviously, when we talk about wide receivers, right, especially guys who come out of nowhere, we have to get Jason Avant's opinion on these things. And Jason watches the tape, and he knows all about what he's seeing there with wide receivers. Jay, is there's part of me that wonders if this is sort of a Travis Fulgham thing, right? And then like 8 weeks from now, are we still going to be talking about Puka Nacua? But then there's a part of me that says he's in a much better system, playing with an established quarterback. And I'll defer to you on what you've seen from Puka Nacua on tape. Real or Travis Fulgham?
I won't say that he's Travis Fulgham, but he's a healthy replacement to Cooper Kupp, and he's taking on Cooper Kupp's responsibility. So if Cooper Kupp is healthy at all, because Cooper Kupp is a much better athlete, much better route runner, and much more sudden when it comes to receiver tact and ability, and he's faster than Puka. So you have to make Cooper Kupp the essential portion of the offense. So I think that you can best rest assured that his stats are going to decline from this point on if Cooper Kupp is healthy, because they're using him as the number one guy. So he's getting those reps. However, he's not as athletic. He's not as dynamic. He is great, like you said, in open spaces, has excellent hands, but there's not one play that I saw on film. I watched it, all of his catches, that he beat someone without help from the offensive coordinator. Lining up and just beat the guy. Not one time did that happen. If it was man-to-man, there was some kind of switch release. He even goes in motion and goes up through the C gap sometimes and open, right? So they're coming up with creative ways to get him open, but he's definitely a product of Sean McVay and not necessarily something that's going to be a sustaining power over time.
All right. Well, hey, if I'm Travis Fulgham, at least I say on that primetime game against the Niners where I caught the winning touchdown, I beat somebody down the sideline and made a nice catch on it. Greg, I think Jason brings up a really good point. It's sort of that if that's the kind of role he plays, and then Cooper Kupp enters the mix, and again, we don't really know, is Cooper coming to play the whole game, some of the game? I don't know, but they've got these two players. How would you expect within the framework of the Rams offense, can both of those guys be on the field and create mismatches the right way?
One of the things that really stands out when you watch the Rams through 4 games, and I think this is McVay to play off Jay's point, is they are so good. McVay is so good with play design and concepts and route combinations versus zone coverage. And that's exactly what Nacua is. Nacua is not an explosive athlete. He's not a sudden twitchy guy, but they do such a great job with their concepts versus zone. And you have to be really aware of, you have to play with discipline, you have to understand splits, you have to understand all those things that go with playing zone coverage against an offensive coordinator. Obviously he's the head coach, but it's basically his offense that does such a good job with formation, use of personnel versus zone coverage. And Nacua, that's his strength. He has a really good feel for finding voids in coverage. But, you know, it's funny. I spoke to someone who was very close with the Rams and basically said to me, hey, look, they know what he is. He just happens to be the guy who's getting thrown a lot of balls right now because Cooper Kupp is out. You know, it's not that he's a bad player. We're not going to sit here and say he's a bad player and shouldn't be in the league. But we're not talking, you know, just because he's leading the league in receptions and he's up among the league leaders in yards, let's not talk about him as if we're talking about, you know, Jefferson or Diggs or Devontae Adams. He's not that quality of player.
Gotcha.
But again, the production is there because of the nature of the offense and the way it's structured and how it creates problems for defenses, particularly zone coverage.
Yeah, Sean McVay's offense kind of makes the defense play zone coverage. Because of those stacks and stuff, it's too hard to sift through to play man-to-man. So it's a nightmare to try to get through all of the trash, right? Because you never know where a guy is going. So you play zone against it, and they're great at it, right? So even when the team does play man-to-man, like the issues that we had against the Commanders last week, like with the guys that we have with Bradley, Roby, even though they're veterans, it's still tough for those guys to get across the field when they have to go through 3 bodies.
Right. So if you factor Adam in that Puka Nacua's emergence with Cooper Kupp returning, and a guy that not enough people I think talk about is Tyler Higbee, who's a good tight end for them. Certainly has caused problems for the Eagles in the past. This is a pretty and Tutu, well, don't forget about him, right? This is a pretty formidable set of weaponry that the Rams are bringing into this game at home against the Eagles defense that, you know, is coming off what it did against Washington, where it struggled in certain times. And
plus, I know that he's been kind of usurped. Van Jefferson is their shot play guy. So you have Tutu Atwell's quickness, and I know he's a smaller guy, but he could run. Nacua knows how to get open, Kupp's back. With Higbee, and I was joking with someone, this could be a 10 personnel game which means 4 receivers out for a route. I mean, they could do that because they now have everybody available, and Skoranek doesn't play a lot. You know, he'll block a little bit. He's the backup X, but this is a pretty good group, Jeff. No, this is not the issue. The issue is, can they protect? That's going to be the story for the Rams today.
I think something Jay said is really important to hit on. They have used motion really effectively this year. And it's really important for someone like Atwell. See, motion is taking over the league a bit, and it's allowing smaller receivers to play. Because what happens is these guys, particularly when they motion across the formation, although it doesn't have to be across the formation, but when it is, these guys get free access off the ball. Atwell is not going to be a volume target, but he's made some big plays this year because you get him across the formation, running routes now, and you get corners who are off, and he releases freely with speed. And that's a tough deal because Atwell can run. And so, that's what happens a lot. So that's really important. It'll be interesting to see how the Eagles choose to play that. I mean, quite frankly, I'm not going to sit here and say Atwell is Tyreek Hill, but that's one reason why the Dolphins, who, by the way, the Eagles have coming up in a few weeks, it's one reason why the Dolphins are so difficult with all their motions. It is so hard to jam off motion, particularly motion across the formation.
Awesome. Okay, good stuff there. I want to get into the guy who's responsible for throwing the ball to all these receivers because he's having a pretty good start. First, I want to remind everybody to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with all their coverage of Philadelphia sports teams, including the Phillies in their playoff run. So they are for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. Check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. Greg, I was listening to you and Clay Harbor talk on Inside the Tape, which is on the Inside the Birds platform, comes out on Thursdays. And you made such a great point about Matthew Stafford, because that guy that you were theoretically referring to is me. You said, well, I could show somebody tape of Matthew Stafford in his delivery about to throw the ball. And if you didn't know the route concepts, you would not know who he's throwing the ball to, even as he is about to deliver. Which is it separates the good quarterbacks from the really, really good ones and great ones. And what kind of year is he having?
I think he's having a good year. And I've always, it's funny. I've always been a Matthew Stafford guy based on tape ever since I watched him coming out of Georgia. And, Stafford is probably going to be in the Hall of Fame discussion when he retires. First of all, he's going to be in the top 10 in every category, and he won a Super Bowl. Whether people think he's a Hall of Famer, I'll leave that to others. I'm not on the committee. But Stafford is still a really good thrower of the football. In fact, I did a piece for the matchup show this week where I actually dealt with their motions, but his first throw to Atwell, if you were sitting with me, Jeff, and as he started his delivery, if I said to you, who's he throwing it to, you wouldn't know. And I'm being honest, you wouldn't know who he's throwing it to. He is a very aggressive thrower. He's got great timing and anticipation. I guarantee in the Eagles defensive back room, they'll say, hey, he'll throw one or he'll throw a couple to us because he's very aggressive and he will turn it loose. He's always been that guy. He's not a risk averse quarterback. He's not a cautious player. But for the most part in his career, he's been really good. But he will drive the ball down the field, and he's got a big arm still, and he can make every throw. And he's one of those quarterbacks you cannot go into a game and think, okay, we're okay because we're playing against Stafford. He can make big time throws throughout a game, and he can still in any given game, complete 25 balls for 400 yards.
That made me want to ask Jason, because to your point, Greg, one thing I noticed and really admired just watching him on tape a little bit is the conviction that he has to throw the ball between the numbers into some tight windows. He is not afraid to do it. You're right. He'll throw an interception every once in a while, but he'll also make a bunch of plays. Jason, as a wide receiver, especially one who roam the inside as much as you, having a guy like that who is fearless to throw the ball into those windows has to be, as long as he's not hurting you and leading you into traffic, that's got to be a really big asset, because I think there are some pretty good quarterbacks in this league who don't throw with conviction like that in between the numbers as Stafford does. I think you're muted. Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
You're good.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it speaks about, speaks to his mentality, his aggressiveness, and also his ability to process information. I think guys get caught with not throwing the ball because they're unsure about what they are seeing. I don't think that Matthew Stafford has a problem with recognizing what defense it is, where a guy is supposed to be, and where the hole is, and how I need to get it there, and what velocity it needs to get there with. Right. So that's what makes him special. You want a guy that you have to coach down, let's back off a little bit, Tiger. We want that guy. I don't want that guy that's out there, hey man, swing the bat. I don't want him. I want the guy that's willing to, to swing the bat as many times as possible. So Matthew Stafford's always been that guy. He's been respected by every player around the league because of that. And he's tough as nails too. That's the other part that you don't get. He's tough as nails. He's a guy that you can hit and sack 5-6 times and still lose the freaking football game, because he's not going to go away with pressure. He's not going to go away because he's getting hit. So, yeah, that's the guy who he is. Now, I would love to play with him as long as he's not throwing the ball high and over the middle.
And you know what, Jeff? Jeff, he was making, what we've come to believe are Patrick Mahomes throws way before Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. He was just doing it with Detroit, and so no one cared. But he was making those kinds of throws way before Patrick Mahomes was making them.
And he was discredited too, Greg, because he was playing with Megatron, right?
Right, that's correct.
With him, but other guys were playing well with him as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he was also doing that, Greg, right? Because he was constantly under duress when he was in Detroit, which is what the Eagles are going to hope to accomplish today, right, Adam? I mean, if there's an area where you think, all right, I think Jason said it, you might sack Stafford 5 times, but you're going to give up. He's going to get you too. I'm sure the Eagles know he's going to get him a few times, but this is the area, as we say week after week, where they should really win up front, even without Fletcher Cox.
I mean, you look at last week, right? The Eagles hit the Washington quarterback 10 times last week, had 5 sacks, but the kid just stood in there and took it. Yep. And Stafford, talking to people, Coach Stafford, incredibly tough. Like he never complains. He's had some very serious injuries. Will play through it for the most part. He's tough. And look, the Eagles have some advantages. I mean, the Rams have a center who's a typical journeyman, a former practice squad guy, Coleman Shelton. We talked about some of their injuries and the replacements. These are matchups that absolutely favor the Eagles, but Stafford also gets rid of the ball quickly. He'll do that despite sometimes you can get to him. This is just fascinating to me, these matchups today, Jeff. This is what makes this game so intriguing, because what looks like a favorite matchup, it doesn't always work out that way.
And
no, it really doesn't. And
I think one thing, and I'm sure we're going to get to this, Jeff, I don't want to jump ahead, or maybe this is the time, is what's the Eagles' D-line rotation going to be like? Fletcher Cox been playing over 50 snaps. It's easy to say, Jalen Carter's going to play this amount, or Milton Williams is going to play this amount. Is Moro Ojomo going to be a meaningful part of it? We don't know what's Jordan Davis's situation. Last week was the first game of the 4 the Eagles have played where Jordan Davis did not play particularly well. Is he capable of playing 40 snaps and as a pass rusher? We don't know the answer to that. That's kind of an open question still. And we can, this becomes speculation, obviously, but it's, I think it's a legitimate question as we go into the game. Not necessarily concern, just a question.
Right. What did you like about Jordan Davis? Just want to answer that real quick. What did you not like about Davis' tape last week?
Davis last week played way too high, and that's an issue that he could, at times will always have. He just played way too high. He got moved too easily. He'll always have a play or two where you go, wow, that Jordan Davis, man, he's special. But, there's as Jay knows, it's the NFL. These are the best guys. There's a lot of guys who can play great for a few snaps here and there, or have a great game here and there. That's not what you're hoping for. But no, I thought he played extremely well through 3 games. And last week he did not play well, and he just played way too high.
Yeah, he got 101 a few times in critical situations down the red zone because he was too high and he looked tired.
Yeah,
like he looked. It's just to me, and I thought, is he playing too many snaps? That was the first thing that came to my head.
And that's why I said about the rotation today, because how does he fit into that rotation? With Fletch out, because Fletch, who I think has played really well through 4 games. I don't know what you guys think. I think he's played really well. And he's played 50 snaps or so, give or take, Jeff, right? I mean, I don't have the number right in front of me.
He's played more than any of the tackles.
He's played them.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you take away all those snaps, who's filling in for all those snaps?
Right. And if we're, this is not like your slot receivers out, Quest Watkins, so you put Olamide Zaccheaus in and he plays, although I would imagine, based on what we know of the Eagles and their rotations, is that they'll figure out down and distances, certain packages, right? And then you will see a little bit of an increase for a lot of guys. It could be Jordan Davis playing a few more, could be, and again, depends on how the game goes, but Jalen Carter plays a few more, Milton Williams plays a few more, and they've had Contavious Street and Marlon Tuipulotu on the field playing combined maybe 11 or 12 snaps a game. You can probably get them to 16 to 20 snaps a game combined and make up for it there. I think that they've actually played fairly decently. What's that?
Yeah, Tuipulotu.
Oh, no, you're right. Tuipulotu's out. I forgot to mention that.
He's out today. Exactly. He's another guy who's out. And by the way, is it okay now, Geoff, for me to give a comment on my what I thought of Ojomo coming out?
Yes, of course.
Because I really liked Ojomo. In fact, I thought he was one of the better interior D-line prospects in the entire draft. I was really surprised where he was drafted. I thought he had a desirable combination of strength and power and quickness and movement. His arms are incredibly long. I thought he had the physical traits and mental competitiveness to play meaningful snaps early in his career. Now, again, I don't know if that means today because of the situation he's going to play 8 snaps or 25 snaps. We don't know that. But I thought he could be a 3 technique. I thought he could be he could be a 1 technique. I really liked his tape a lot coming out of Texas, and I was kind of surprised as to where he was drafted. So we'll see. He may get a meaningful opportunity today.
Yeah, Adam and I both had different personnel sources tell us that they thought the Eagles, I don't want to call it a steal, but thought that they were very fortunate to be able to get a player like Moro Ojomo in the 7th round. And one person even told me that the Texas Longhorns defensive staff felt that Ojomo was their best interior rusher, and they were shocked that he had gotten to day 3.
You know me, Geoff. I'm not great with where a guy should go in a draft. I don't really, that's not the way I do my work. And Adam knows that. I've been doing, for years and years. But, every once in a while I do see a guy and I say to myself, wow, 7th round. God, I thought that guy's tape was really good, which doesn't mean I thought he should have been a top 40 pick. But I mean, I could easily have seen him going anywhere from, 75 to 120. And to me, that wouldn't have been a stretch at all.
Yeah, there was Jeff there were some minor character issues with him, which is why he dropped. That's what we were told by multiple people. Not a bad kid. He just some stuff.
No, not a bad guy.
Yeah. There's some stuff that they had that the teams weren't comfortable with. For in terms of drafting him earlier, but he's had no problems with the Eagles, and this is interesting today because they love playing this big rotation. Fletcher Cox led them in tackles. In snaps, which nobody expected. That's the incredible thing here, Geoff. So today it's going to be interesting because we should mention. Look, when Fletcher retires, if he's not back next year, this is the way it's going to look. These kids are going to play.
Right. No, it's really fascinating stuff. So again, this is where we expect the Eagles, even without Fletcher Cox, to want to dominate, up front, because that's how they roll. I want to get into the Rams offensive line in a second, because I think it's done a little bit better than people expected. But if you take a step back overall and look at the Rams, I think they became the butt of a lot of jokes because they had such a terrible year last year. The whole, you sold everything you had just to win the Super Bowl. Now you're injured. Now you're older. And now you have no 1st-round draft picks. But Puka Nacua, we just spoke about, was a 5th-round pick. They have a rookie on defense that we'll get to who's playing fairly well. And they also have a pretty good left guard here, who's a rookie named Steve Avila out of TCU, who has started from, I believe, day 1 for them. Right, Greg?
Yeah, he's been basically a day 1 starter. And he's one of those guys that is going to play for 10 years in this league and probably be a starter every single year. Just a really, really solid prospect. Just one of those guys. Yeah, I would bet, and Adam, you may know more than I do from talking to more people, but I would bet that there's not many people that didn't think this guy was a meaningful prospect.
No, you're right. In fact, because he's a guard, guards typically don't go in the 1st round. But no, he was seen as one of the top interior linemen. I think a Super Bowl guy, if not mistaken. And look, the Rams, they've had all this major shuffle in the offensive line, but they've got one guy, Avila, who Geoff mentioned, who's absolutely going to be there for years. They just have to figure out, unfortunately, the rest of the offensive line, what that looks like for the future.
Yeah. Listen, smart teams draft interior offensive linemen, good ones, in the 2nd round, because a lot of them, they'll have low 1st-round grades on, but they know that the positional value is that some team's going to take a corner or a pass rusher or a left, and those guys get pushed down. That's the Eagles got Cam Jurgens, and they got Landon Dickerson that way.
I was going to say, wasn't Dickerson a 2nd-round pick?
Yep. He was. Jurgens and Dickerson.
And I think, look, we know what Howie's done over the years, and we know what his belief is that it's O line and D line, and you know, I can't sit here now because and then go through every team in the league, but how many teams have, you know, a nice quarterback, good skill position players, you know, and then you look at their O line and I know they were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but look at the Cincinnati Bengals. You know, I mean, the O line is just not really good enough. And at some point that really comes back and bites you.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, to the point we're making, Avila, John Michael Schmitz, the center for the Giants, the guy Bergeron for the Falcons. These are all interior offensive linemen who are playing when healthy, and we're all second round picks. Cody Mauch for the Tampa Bay.
Bergeron was the left tackle at Syracuse, but he's a really good prospect.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, we mentioned Juergens and Landon Dickerson. So again, you know, when you're looking at the offensive line for the Rams, I know it's considered sort of a weak spot, but they do have some bright spots there, and we'll see if they're able to block it up against this Eagles defensive front. Real quick, let's close out Eagles defense, because I thought, Jason, that Hassan Reddick last week, without the cast, he looked to me like he was able to use his hands more, a little active, got his first sack. Did you notice a difference from Hassan Reddick against Washington than from the first 3 weeks of the season?
Yeah, he was in the backfield a lot more than what we were, you know, used to in the first 3 games. So definitely had to be a difference with the cast being off. He felt like himself, and if that's going to occur, this team it will be pretty much unstoppable because of the guys inside. If he can just have, you know, 3/4 of the production that he did last year, this team will be very, very tough to stop. You know, I'll say this last week because we really didn't touch this when we were talking about the defense. I don't know if we got to it yet. I will say that Sam Howell stuck in there a lot, but I don't think we blitzed them as much as Buffalo did the previous week. And I thought that may have been a mistake, especially, you know, later in that game, to come after him a little bit more, put some zero on him. We were, you know, a little bit hesitant. But to get back to the original point, Hassan Reddick looked great, and his hand looked like it was the issue the first 3 games and not him, the player.
Right. All right. Well, that could be a huge matchup today against our Rams offensive tackles. So we will see. All right. We're closing out hour 1. We're going to pause for a moment to hear from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It is the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right. Hour 2 of Inside the Birds pregame live, presented, of course, by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Eagles 4-point road favorites today against the Rams with an over-under of 50. Sounds like they think some points might be scored. As we mentioned on the last week's preview show, the Eagles have the best road record in the NFL since Nick Sirianni became head coach in 2021. He's 15-4, and Jalen Hurts has won 10 consecutive road starts going back to the second half of the 2021 season. Adam, you almost think the Eagles, the way things are going for them, have 2 objectives today, right? Win the game. That's number 1. 2, it's try not to lose another player for the next 4 weeks to short-term reserve or longer, because all the success they had in keeping guys healthy last year seems like 1 per week, whether it's Maddox, whether it's Nakobe Dean, now Cam Juergens. They've had to really navigate through a lot of injuries, but this is where their depth really separates them from some other teams.
Yeah, their depth was not really tested much last year, but this year in a major way. And they also, look, Greedy Williams not working out really hurt them. I don't think we talked about it enough. That was the guy they wanted. If someone got hurt at corner, he would be the guy would go in. If someone needed help, he could do that. And then, of course, then you add Maddox's injury, which obviously has made them shuffle everything. This is a problem. In fact, the next 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the trade deadline will ultimately decide whether they make a trade for a slot corner. If Roby works out, great, they don't have to do that. But the other thing is, if having a good veteran backup outside corner, that you need those guys. I mean, we just talked about Slade didn't have his best game last week. Bradbury hopefully will be able to remain on the outside, and that would help Josh Roby, the third outside corner. But the bottom line is they need experience back there, and getting Roby here is obviously in the twilight of his career at 31 years old. I mean, you hope that he's got something left. Remember, the Saints did cut him. Let's not forget about that. So, Geoff, just to finish this off here, depth is being tested, and also with the older players, what do they have left?
Right.
You're going to learn, because when the Eagles play the Dolphins in 2 weeks, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys trap, the Seahawks who could score, you're really going to see this depth tested on the back end.
Wow, 100%.
Can I jump in and say something? And just the way that I see it on tape, and this is not to spark outrage with the Eagles fans. I don't think that teams look at our secondary and say to themselves, there isn't a guy that we shouldn't throw at. Right. That's the thing. Like, Darius Slay's a great player. Even last year, they get a lot of targets at them, right? Because they think that they can make yards. Usually guys that are extremely dominant, you don't go there as much, or you see a high target area. The opposite corner is getting 75% of the targets, and the other guy that's the dominant player is getting 25%. We're not seeing that. And I know for sure from players, interviews, and looking at these podcasts of other players, they feel that James Bradberry, there's a certain point, a limitation that they can go down the field on this guy and get some yards. So we have to shore up some things, and they have to put out better tape.
Did it surprise you that not only did both of those guys come back, but on longer term contracts, given their age and what you just mentioned about how they are perceived versus how impactful they've been?
Well, to me, the perception of another player or GM or whoever you talk to, that's not the issue. It's about what the player is producing in your defense, right? So if your team says the value is here, who am I to say that they're not worthy of it? And remember, let's not go so far-fetched to say, hey, these guys are declining. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying these guys are going to have to bow up because people don't view them as guys you need to hide from.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
100% right, by the way. And by the way, when they signed Bradberry, they did not, I mean, I know they had probably had when did that signing take place, Geoff, Adam? Do you remember?
It was about a week into free agency. He was flirting with some other teams, and then they were going through that whole Slay scenario and the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson saga at the same time. And then I think once Chauncey signed with the Lions, it was like the next day or two that they re-signed Bradberry, if I'm correct on that.
Yeah, Slay was first.
Mm-hmm.
And Slay and Bradberry signed new deals within 24 hours of each other.
Right.
Remember, Slay was going to be gone. Where they told him they were going to release him, and then within 8 hours later, they.
but the bottom line point is Jay is 100% right, and it's a tape thing. You watch the tape. That's what the tape tells you. Yeah, there's no sense that you have to stay away from Darius Slay, which again is not saying he's not a good player, and that's the point Jay was making. But ultimately, teams don't feel that, we can't throw the ball to Darius Slay.
Right. All right, let's flip it and talk about the Eagles' offense here as we move into the matchup. From an offensive standpoint, I thought the Eagles did something different last week against Washington, specifically in the first quarter, that we hadn't seen in the first few weeks. I believe in the first 15 plays, if you go back week 1, week 2, week 3, you see a lot of alternation between 12 personnel, 11 personnel. It looked to me like the Eagles, and Greg, you see the tape better than I do, but they came out sort of 11 and we're with an I'm going to throw against Washington mentality, not I'm going to mix it up. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, I mean, they played almost 90% of their offensive snaps out of 11 personnel. And, my guess is they might have felt that way because on early down and distances, your normal down and distance, the Commanders will play big nickel versus 11, and big nickel meaning 3 safeties. So my guess is they felt that was a personnel package that they could exploit the big nickel, particularly, first down, second down, 2nd and 4, 1st and 10, because that's what the Commanders would do. They would play with 3 safeties. Right. So that was, again, we don't know if that's the way they'll play every week, but my guess is that was specifically game plan for what the Commanders brought to the table with their big nickel approach. Because the Commanders rarely I don't know how many snaps of three linebackers they played all year. Probably goal line, short yardage. That's not really part of what they do.
Mm-hmm. And Adam, of course, you can't. Jay, I will get to you in 1 second, but I know Adam. We can't have an Eagles win, right, without a little bit of a drama or controversy created. And the whole snapshot of Nick Sirianni making what looks like he's taking over play calls became a storyline throughout the year. What do you know about that situation? What have we learned about Nick Sirianni's influence on the play calling?
I mean, Nick didn't even. He admitted that he influenced some calls this season, and that there was a call in this past game that he influenced. But we talked to John T. Flippo about this. John said, actually, this floored me. What about you, Jeff? I was surprised to hear John say this in our 40-minute chat with him this week for Patreon. One of the things we discussed was potentially a head coach giving the play caller some influence. He said he actually welcomes it once in a while. Hey, because sometimes you want to hear different ideas. You can't be so locked into that the OC should not have any input. Of course you should. These are the kind of discussions that go on in the game. And now what you don't want, though, is what Nick talked about. You don't want to micromanage your offense coordinator where he's worried about being second guessed all the time. That's what Nick is claiming. He's not doing that. And he came up with some fictitious number. He said, 15 or 16 times so that means like 3 or 4 times a game he goes, hey, let's do this. It happens. Yeah. I don't think it's a problem now, though. I'm not getting any feedback anywhere that it's a problem right now.
Jason, I wanted to ask you about that because when you played for Andy, I mean, there were times where he was the play caller, he wasn't the play caller, somebody else was play calling, everybody was play calling. I mean, you guys just have to go carry out the plays that are called, but I'm sure on the sideline, you might notice interactions and things like that. What was your take on it?
Might notice interactions. The reason that we call timeout so much is because guys are arguing over plays.
Really?
And that's how it goes because we have strong personalities. Now, Brian is young guy. This is his first year doing this, right? So you're going to have Nick Sirianni that has some experience and is the head coach that's going to have a little bit more seniority there. But when you have a guy like Marty Morningwig that grew up in the same offense as you, that played with, Coach Steve Young and know what it's like to be around those guys, right? So it wasn't much of a gap there. So you had two strong opinions going back and forth at times. Mm-hmm. But as long as ego doesn't prevail, you'll be fine. Right. The goal is that the team wins. The goal is that the offense is successful and we're scoring touchdowns and scoring points and beating the opponent, right? So I think coaches that say, this is mine and coddle it, I think you're doing the offense a disservice. I think that it needs to be approached game time differently, right? That you guys have a game plan of how you guys are going to interact, that is not just sporadic. And yes, the offense coordinator is feeling like he's being undermined, but if you guys talk it through beforehand, hey, in this situation, I'm going to have some input because I have, these things in mind. So I don't want you to take it personal. But if we get into a 4-minute drill, I want to take over this portion of the game or whatever it is. As long as you guys are communicating, just like in life and relationships and wherever else, communication is the key.
Yeah, the only takeaway I had, hearing that and then hearing Nick talk about it was because my sense so far through 4 weeks going into 5 was that Brian Johnson likes calling a balanced game. He's not afraid to go to the run because it's such a weapon. And this was a game where clearly the Eagles, as a coaching staff, as Greg mentioned, may have wanted to take advantage of the aerial attack based on what Washington showed. So I wondered if Nick felt he had to have a little bit more influence on that to say, hey, we want to make sure we are establishing the pass game.
Yeah, I don't always agree with that. Now, you may like the way that the offense looks because you can generate more points scoring 30, but I believe that body shots eventually catch up to you as well, right? So I think we had in our mind, based on the prior games we played against the Commanders, that their front with Payne and Allen and those guys were going to stop our run. I think we just automatically assumed that this game. We didn't give guys the opportunities to move them. We just decided that this is going to be a passing game, and we went with that. But we didn't try to test them on the ground to see if they're going to hold up like they did in the past. I think that's your job as an offense to make sure that guys, even if they have a track record of success, that you go and test it to make sure that they're solid and say, hey, I'll move away from it in the second half or whatever it may be. But this Eagles team said, we're going to pass it from the beginning. We're not going to test the run. And DeAndre Swift didn't help me in fantasy this week. And I'm
but he ran very well, even though he only
You're among many
carries,
people.
He still looked good. But the other thing, Geoff, which leads into, in my opinion, a great segue for this week, is they knew, based on film study, that in 11 personnel, that Forbes was the boundary corner. Ooh. They knew that from film study. So they knew where he was going to be. Okay. So they were attacking that. Okay. And they had great success doing so. And the reason I say that is a good segue into this week is one of the things about a Raheem Morris defense. Raheem Morris has a little bit of Vic Fangio in him. Okay. So their initial structure tends to be split safety, 2 shell, but he does a really good job when the ball's snapped of blurring those lines between split safety and does it become kind of single high with a robber? He does a really good job with that. So a lot of times for a quarterback, if you feel like that picture is not quite clear, what do quarterbacks want to do, Geoff? They want to work outside the numbers, okay? Because it's clear outside the numbers. And now you have Kendrick and Witherspoon, who, hey, up to this point, they've been okay, but I think you want to attack Kendrick and Witherspoon in this game. Wouldn't you say, Jay?
100%. There's no Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams out there, guys, that you have to think about. Okay, if it's Darius Williams in his zone and we're at the sticks, I don't necessarily want to throw that ball at the sticks at him, or I don't want to attack Jalen Ramsey in man-to-man. They don't have that, and our receivers should play really well this game.
So again, getting back to the point about Brian Johnson, I agree with your general point, Geoff, a lot. I think Brian Johnson, in an abstract philosophical world, would like to run the football. But I think just like we spoke about week 2 against the Vikings, I think what we saw last week was a good example, whether it was Sirianni or Brian Johnson, it doesn't matter. It was the offensive approach. They realized what they had, and they attacked that particular defense. And that's, to me, what good coaching is. It started with my initial point when you asked me about the 49ers and the Eagles. You have to be able to play different ways. If you can't do that, if you can only win or play offense one way, you're going to get stuck in given games.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to talk about how the Eagles are going to now attack the Rams and Jalen Hurts coming off of his performance against Washington. First, I want to just tell everybody to make your money work smarter, not harder, with MyBookie. Celebrate your winning season with MyBookie's biggest welcome offer ever. That's a $200 cash bonus on your first deposit. I'm sorry, did you hear that right? $200 cash bonus on your first deposit. That's before you even place your first bet by making a deposit with MyBookie. All you have to do, it's very easy. You just go to mybookie.ag and use our promo code THEBIRDS. That's THEBIRDS. It's all one word, capitals, to claim the bonus. And make sure that you act quickly because the offer is going to be only available for a limited time. You can only get it using that promo code, THEBIRDS. THEBIRDS. With a full slate of NFL and college football, there are plenty of options to bet and win. Do not be the person who has missed out on this great deal. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. All right, getting back to the Eagles offense, I think last week we all agree in our separate shows on Inside the Birds, we've all made a mention that Jalen Hurts sort of had the closest version of the 2022 Jalen Hurts last week against the Commanders. So Greg, just real quick, because we were talking about it, what about his game stood out to you last week compared to maybe the first 3 or 4 weeks?
I would say overall he was a little more decisive in his reads and his throws. And as he did last season, he made some outstanding vertical throws. And when you make vertical throws, that always magnifies the performance in a real positive way because that creates big yards and touchdowns, Geoff. But, I don't know if you guys notice it, and we'll see if it's a factor going forward. I don't think he looks the same in terms of his movement. I think he looks a little slower in his just overall movement.
Yep.
Are you reading my script, Greg? Because that was the very next question that
I didn't. I hate to say it, Jeff, but I figure, that I didn't look at your script. I just
no, that's okay. I like it when you don't. We like this.
I just figure we're going to talk ball anyway, so I don't look at it.
Hey, Greg, movement, physical movement or processing?
Physical movement.
Yeah.
I thought, and again, processing, it's funny you mentioned that, Jay, because processing is always easier when you feel you can work outside. Because if you feel it's clean outside, it doesn't take as much in terms of progression reading and processing because you're not working in the middle of the field where there's a lot of bodies. So if you feel you have matchups outside, you're pretty much just making certain that a safety can't impact that throw. And very often, even if it's single high, safeties really are not going to get there if it's really truly outside the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Jason, you've noticed that as well, that there's a different element to his running or the physical nature of his game.
I think that they've made a decision, and he has made a decision not to put his body on the line the same way.
I agree.
I
think it's pretty obvious.
That's what I think. Because we don't see how many quarterback design runs have we seen?
Funny you should ask that question, Jason. I have the stats here available. You guys are just so good at predicting what I'm about to say. Through 4 weeks last year, Jalen Hurts had rushed for 205 yards, had scored 4 rushing touchdowns on 53 attempts. That was the most rushing attempts and by any quarterback not named Lamar Jackson in that span. And he also had the most rushing touchdowns. This year, he has 6 so far in rushing yards, and he has not only does he have just 134 rushing yards, but 28 attempts. So we're talking about going from, what did I say, 53 attempts to 20. That's almost half as many attempts as he had last year. So there's 2 things that stand out, right, Adam? He's not running with the ball in a freelance motion as much, or if he does, he gets down immediately. And 2, it doesn't seem like he's keeping on the zone reads nearly as much. And I agree with Jason. You look at that, and it's hard not to think that is not a coaching point and a personal decision point on the quarterback and the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, you see him go down quickly. It's good that he protected himself, but that was not like him last year. I mean, you saw explosive as he was. I mentioned to you off the air. I said we need to probably talk about this. I wonder if Jay and Greg saw that he didn't look as explosive. So no, that's there's no way to know why. And we asked John T. Filippo that. John said that he didn't notice that he was trying to protect himself, but he wasn't really noticing or looking for to slow the tape down and see if he looks slower. I thought he looked slower, but it's something we're going to have to watch going forward because look, part of how special Hurts was and their offense was when teams are so concerned about Hurts running the football, you would see how the way that they would react.
Yeah. 13 attempts per game now to 7 rushing attempts per game, Jason.
Well, it's not a bad thing because it may be judicial on his part, right? To say, okay, I'm the guy now. They paid me as such. I want to preserve my body and I want to be able to stick around. And I'll do this at the right times. Maybe when the games matter the most, maybe in the fourth quarter in the last 2 minutes, or maybe down the down stretch of a playoff run or in the playoffs. Maybe he's thinking in his mind, I'll do it at that time. And maybe I've literally had coaches teaching quarterbacks how to slide, how to preserve their body, how to have longevity. And with there's a lot of stuff going on.
I thought you were teaching your iPad how to slide there for a second.
Yeah, right. So there's a lot of things, that's transpiring. And here's the thing. Here's the positive about it. If you cut off the legs, you're forced to play the game with your brain. And eventually he's going to be able to do the things that we've seen the upper echelon quarterbacks. If he continue down this path and he's having success and they're winning, eventually he's going to get to the point where he's going to be able to dissect the defense, Tom Brady style. Maybe if he continues down this path, if he cuts off the lower half and it may not be the way that we're accustomed to him playing, but if he's getting wins, who cares?
Right. And Greg, I'll throw this to you because for some reason the Minnesota game, it just sticks out vividly to me. how they were trying to defend the run with such light boxes. But I can remember seeing, even though Jalen wasn't running much, Jordan Hicks kind of, do I go inside? Do I go out? Like he's still accounted for, I believe, by defenses in the run game, even if he's not running. And that's really all that matters at some point is, are you accounting for it or not, right?
Well, you have to still account for it because you can't go into a game saying, well, gee, I don't think he's going to run. You can't do that. You know, it's like anything. You can, you know, if a team lines up with, you know, 6 guys in the box on defense, you can't say, well, I don't think they're going to blitz. I mean, you still have to account for stuff. But the point is I agree with Jay. I think, or maybe you said it, Jeff, but I think there's probably a conscious decision. Yeah. You know, at some point, the body feels it. You know, Jalen to me has always been an interesting runner. I wouldn't call him sudden and explosive. He's kind of a big physical runner. You know, he's not slow. You know, he's not plodding, but he's not, Jay, do you agree? I mean, he's not sudden and explosive in the way he moves, but he has a very good feel for how to run. But he may decide, you know what, I just, the more shots you take, you can be as big as and strong, and you know he can bench press or do whatever that particular weight is that he can do at 9,000 pounds. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of bodies that hit you and that fall on you, and that's the part that's never talked about. Guys fall on you.
Yeah, he's not a sudden runner. He's not an explosive runner. He's a powerful runner that has like a one cut. He's a one cut runner.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. He'll make a guy miss. It's going to be off the one leg, one cut. That's his thing. And everything else is going to be, you know, running past it, running, you know, powerful.
Yeah, he's the Alfred Morris of running quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I always use the word deceptive because, to your guys' point, I always felt that if you just watch him in a game when he was at his best, like to New Orleans a couple of years ago, juking Demario Davis, right, that he's deceptive in that you would watch that and think he probably runs like a 4.5 or did test really well in the 3-cone, but didn't, right? He just tests like a good but not explosive athlete. But when you watch him on tape, you kind of think he probably would have tested better. So that's always been the case with him. But yes, clearly not running as much as he used to. But still, the Eagles' offense has been pretty darn good so far. All right, let's take a quick break. I want to get into the offense a little bit more. We'll talk about how they attack this Ram defense. First, we want to take a second to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars, including the voice of the Eagles. That's Mr. Merrill Reese.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225. Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan. Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right, we are in hour 2 of Inside the Birds pregame live. Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan here, of course, with Greg Cosell and Jason Avant. We're talking about the Eagles offense against this Rams defense. Jalen Hurts coming off his best passing effort of the year. Now, the run game was okay against the Commanders, who have an excellent front and finally played like it. The Rams are a little different. They've got the 14th best run defense in the league, so they're middle of the pack. But they do have Aaron Donald, who can just completely wreck a game. He is again among the leaders in disruptive plays. I think only 4 NFL players have more tackles for a loss this year than Donald. He's tied with several others who have 5. He also has 2.5 sacks and 6 quarterback hits. This is sort of in tune with what we've been saying about the Rams and the reports of their demise, Adam, because I know last year, him, Cooper Kupp, they all battled injuries and everybody thought, this is it. These guys are done. They're old. They're over the hill. I think Aaron Donald even pondered also retirement at one point, but he's back and he looks like Aaron Donald looks.
Yeah, he does. He looks amazing. And as John Filippo was telling us, you have to have, there are rules that you have, and he was explaining to us this week about the protection rules because of the way that they move them around. And I remember, they went up against him in 17, the Super Bowl year, right? That was in LA at the Coliseum. They
had a good plan for him.
And then they played him in 18 and also in 2020. That was the COVID year, the pandemic year. Mm-hmm. And look, they know this player. There's no question. Obviously, there's a different staff now, but I'm interested to see how they handle him. And Greg could obviously tell us how they align him, how they move him around. But that's not going to be easy, and that's obviously the big thing. Because other than him, although I really want to talk about the kid Byron Young, who's also started to come on here. Overall, Jeff, this is not a defense you're super worried about, but obviously it starts with that.
Yeah, Greg. I mean, Aaron Donald's not that type of player. It's not like left tackle versus D end where you worry about that 60 snaps a game. I mean, I think everybody in the O-line sort of has to be conscious of Donald because of how they move him around and where he lines up and the stunting and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, essentially with Donald, the bigger issue comes when you're in pass situations. I mean, obviously in normal down and distance, you kind of know where he is and he's a D tackle. But in pass situations, they do a lot of things with their fronts. They're a big loaded front team. So they line up with 3 defensive linemen to one side of the center. Now, depending on how they feel the matchups work, that will determine where he lines up. Last week, because the Colts started a rookie left tackle, Blake Freeland, out of BYU, who was a player whose tape I didn't particularly like, they knew that was the patsy. And Donald just ate up Freeland numerous times. And that's where they lined him up as a wide 9 opposite the loaded front. This week, they could well line him up as the middle guy in the load so he gets a running start against Opeta, and see how that works and see how that plays out and see if the Eagles then have to react a certain specific way, if the matchup isn't working for the Eagles. But essentially, it's really third down or second and long that you really have to deal with Donald. I'm not saying he's not going to make any plays on first down, guys, but basically he's going to line up at D tackle on first down. You're going to essentially know where he is on first down.
Right. And how is he, would you describe him as a run defender?
I think he can be really, really good. There are other times he'll, want to shoot into gaps, and depending on what the run call is, sometimes you can run by him. But I mean, he's just a great player, Jeff. It's not like he's not a great player.
Right. Jason, they've got Nacua Opeta, who's going to start right guard. And as we just mentioned, they were against the Colts left tackle, right? They tried to get Donald around the edge a little bit. Mailata's had a good year, but last week he had a couple of tough reps against Chase Young.
How'd you know where I was going to go? I said the two in my brain off the top is the place that he'll go is Opeta and Mailata. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 places because it's hard for a guy that can bend as well as Donald for Mailata to be able to stick with him being so tall. It's just a tough proposition. And yes, he gave up pressure last week. So I'm thinking that, Aaron Donald and Morris have seen that. So Opeta, let's try him first. But the only thing about trying Opeta is that Jason Kelsey's there and he's great at helping.
Yeah.
But Mailata may be that guy that they try.
Yeah. You could have been a nice guy, Jason, and helped those guys open up the door for them behind you. They were just carting something through, but no, you got to go talk Eagles with us.
No, it's been a lot of stuff going on. It was
I'm just messing around.
It was one family that literally could have been anywhere in the hotel where they came right next to me to have a conversation.
Of course they did. Of course they did. You're just so welcoming,
Yeah, right.
the Mailata thing is interesting because this goes back to the whole, like, you can look not so great on 3 snaps, look really good on 57 others, but those 3 snaps really stood out. And I think a couple of times this year, he's had games where you take 2 or 3 snaps and say, you know, he got beat on those. I mean, even week 1, I think, you know, we talked week 1, Mailata, Lane Johnson, and somebody else, Cam Jurgens, I think, struggled too. But this is the type of player with the speed and the low center of gravity, as Jason's talking about, Adam, that you're probably going to be looking at Mailata. Say he's got to be very conscious, and I'm sure he is this week, of Donald coming around that way. Yeah,
look, this will be his. I'm going to guess his first game against Donald. So we'll see how they line him up. But I'm just interested to see. Yeah, I'm interested to see kind of what does Raheem Marsh is really smart, by the way. He'll be a head coach again. I'm interested to see who he thinks they could win against. You know, Greg talked about the loaded front. Certainly, that's going to be something that they do. But where do they think they can win? Because every defensive coordinator looks at it with their D-line coach. Okay, here's who we can win against. I've had these conversations with coaches forever. No matter what side of the ball, you're looking for matchups, and how will you get them? Will ultimately determine what kind of success they have.
And that loaded front's really interesting, guys, because there's a lot of stunt concepts that come from that. And Ernest Jones, the linebacker, is really the wild card there, because a lot of teams would love to be able to take that uncovered guard opposite the load so they could slide their line to the load and essentially get 4-on-3. Mm-hmm. But what teams do, and the Rams will do it, is then they put one of the linebackers, if they're in a 4-2, let's say a 4-2 nickel, they'll put the linebackers a 3 technique basically to the side opposite the load, so that guard can't automatically be part of his slide to the loaded side. So now you're basically dealing 3-on-3 with different stun concepts, and it can be problematic. You know, we'll see. I mean, that's just, again, that doesn't mean that they're going to dominate the Rams, but that's something I guarantee that Jeff Stoutland and the Eagles O-line worked on all week, and we will see it somewhere in this game.
Absolutely. All right. I do want to talk about one other Rams pass rusher who is starting to make a name for himself. More on him in just 1 second. We want to stop just to thank our production team of James and Zach, always back behind the wheels of Inside the Birds pregame live. They bring this show to you in high definition with new graphics, videos, so much more. And we are eternally indebted to them for all of their hard work behind the scenes to bring this show to life. So James, Zach, thank you so much. Doing a great job as always. The guy who I want to talk about is a rookie, another rookie who was not picked in the first round, since the Rams did not have first round picks and people made fun of them, but he's doing a nice job. Now, the funny thing of it is that he shares the name with another rookie in the NFL. He is an edge rusher by the name of Byron Young, and there, I believe, was an offensive lineman by the name of Byron Young that went to Alabama, was it?
No, he was a defensive tackle.
Oh, D-tackle. Okay.
D-tackle, yes.
Alabama.
Yes.
From Alabama, right. He was a lineman from Alabama. But this Byron Young was from Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. Or am I wrong on that? Yeah.
You're right.
Adam, did you get to, was he a Senior Bowl guy? Did you get to see Byron Young at all?
I don't remember, but I know that I just happened to talk to someone in scouting lead up to the draft, because I had to differentiate between both Byron Youngs.
Right.
At the table. So this kid is a great story. He's older. He turns 26 in March, I think. And was working odd jobs. He went to a military college, and then he transferred in, and really good kid. Has come up from a challenging last, 5 or 6 years to get to this point, but a great story. And Greg, what do you think of the tape, man? Is he as good as some people are saying?
I think he's going to keep getting better and better. Now, this kid he can bend now. He's one of those guys that's sudden. He's twitchy. He's athletic. He can burst off the ball. He's got body flexibility. He's got motorcycle lean. You really noticed it at the combine. And, it's interesting because you noticed it at the combine in relation to Will Anderson, who doesn't really have any of those things. Will Anderson's a different player, but Byron Young can bend. And I think he'll just continue to get better. I think through the first 4 games, he's had moments. But he's still figuring out how he can use his traits and his skill set most effectively. But he's a really fascinating player because he's an explosive athlete.
Does he ordinarily line up over left tackle, right tackle? Do they move him around? Is he another guy who can twist and stunt and loop? And
he lines up on both sides, as I recall. He ran for whatever this means, guys, other than it means he's a really good athlete, he ran a 4.43 at 248 pounds.
Right. Wow. That's pretty good.
For size, yeah, it's really good.
So go ahead.
What is this? Have the Eagles played all 3-4 defenses this year?
Well, what do you consider what the Minnesota Vikings did in week 2? They were sort of a hybrid, interesting kind of defense that.
Well, yeah, but their base is 5-2, 3-4. Yeah.
We're odd man front.
Yeah.
So it really all depends on what the Eagles do, Jay, I guess, with their personnel. If they're going to play 11 personnel, they might not get a lot of that 3-4 look.
Yeah. It's funny that you said Raheem Morris is sort of a guy who has some Fangio in him, because the first thing I thought was, is there a defensive coordinator in the NFL today that does not have a little bit of Fangio in him, other than Vic Fangio, who has a lot of Vic Fangio in him because he is Vic Fangio. It just goes back to our conversation of the changing dynamics, right, Jay, of the NFL passing game versus the NFL passing defense game, and the desire that teams have of wanting to keep everything in front, wanting to try to cause some confusion on the back end without having to blitz all the time. Yeah. Now, even though you thought that Sean Desai, and I agree with you, played soft on that last play, perfect chance to 0, but he didn't. I think in that fourth quarter, Desai probably blitzed a little bit more within that framework than his average for the year.
Okay.
Right. Because Nick Moro had 3 sacks. I think I don't know if he was coming because
all of Nick Moro's sacks wasn't blitz based. It was he was the rush to cover guy.
Right.
Yeah. You get what I mean? So the guy that he was responsible for went to block and he added. Right. But it wasn't necessarily, I'm blitzing.
No, well, that's a great point you make, because I wonder how the metrics people, when if you go to a certain metric site and say, well, how often does this team blitz? Right. Oh, 24% of the time, Sean Desai. Well, when they're charting that's a blitz, but it's not per se a called blitz. No, well, it's a blitz if you're going to have a certain look.
The way most sites deal with blitz is 5-man pressures. Okay. And that's not always correct.
Right.
But only one of Moro's came on a true blitz. It was a double-A with Cunningham, and they actually had a really cool stunt with it. I think Moro was the penetrator and Cunningham was the looper, but Moro got in. The other two, as Jay said, were not blitzes in a strict sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah. One of them fell right to his lap. Someone had the sack. They stepped up. I can't remember which one of the big guys. They had the stack, and he stepped up there in order just to make sure the quarterback didn't get out of the pocket and ended up with a sack.
Right.
A lot of teams, Jeff, do what are called simulated pressures or zone exchange, where they take a second or third level player and add him into the rush, but a D lineman drops out. So it's a 4-man pressure. And those don't get charted on a lot of websites as pressures. But my guess is offensive coaches chart those as pressures because a second or third level player is coming.
Sure. And that does threaten your protection scheme if you don't know.
Well, yes.
Yes. Yeah. So what do the Rams do defensively that the Eagles offense should look for today? Are they a heavy blitzing, other than the loaded fronts that we talk about? Will they bring somebody from the second level? Will they bring, pressure in different ways that the Eagles may not have seen?
I wouldn't view them as a heavy blitz team. I think the biggest thing that they do, and this is what has become the Vic Fangio thing. That has now become a thing people just throw out. But I think the biggest thing with the so-called Vic Fangio is the blurring of the split safety and the single high and the robber, the single high. That to me is what a lot of teams are doing now, because what you want to do is you want to try to create just a fraction of hesitation for the quarterback when he takes the snap of the ball, because it's a game of fractions. You talk to quarterbacks, they'll tell you, they don't have a lot of time. When they take the snap and drop into the pocket, they don't have a lot of time. Things happen pretty fast. So if you can just create just a fraction of hesitation, you can perhaps win as a defense. So I think that's kind of become the Fangio thing. And I think Raheem Morris does a really good job with that. Jordan Fuller is particularly good at that on the back end for the Rams.
Another thing I'll add to that is that when you look at their sack numbers and you see them play, they're not adding a bunch of people into the blitz as well, right? So there's not a bunch of guys that are coming off the edge or safeties doing different things. And I think it's just because of their youth and their inexperience. So we're not seeing that aspect of Raheem Morris. We've seen it in the past, but right now they don't feel as comfortable with bringing guys that are not that are, you know, unconventional safeties and nickels and things of that nature. So yes, it's going to try to confuse the quarterback, make sure that you're assignment pure, because you're practicing and, you know, especially during training camp, against a gimmicky, and I hate to say it that way because there's a better term for it, but to me it's a more of a gimmicky style of offense where there's a bunch of tight splits and motions and things like that. So you have to be assignment pure. And I think the best way that you can confuse them is by disguising the coverage and making sure your guys are assignment pure. And I think that's what this defense is.
Jay, Dallas Goedert. I know that Clay Harbor, who will be on our post-game show today, felt watching the tape that and he will not be he'll be in normal clothes, Jay. He's not going to be an underwear model, I promise you.
Greg, you talked him out of it.
Well, Greg's going to be the one in his underwear. So that's
no. We actually want people to like watch and listen.
Yeah.
I know Clay.
Greg.
Clay felt that maybe in this last game against Washington that Dallas route running could have been a little bit better, a little bit more impactful, maybe because he's not getting the ball that might be impacting him. There was that play against the blitz, I think late in the game where, Jalen wanted to target him and it didn't. I think what Clay was trying to say is his route stem wasn't exactly made to just go and then sit down and catch the ball. Did you see the same way? Or are you seeing anything from Dallas where you can tell he's not getting the ball and it's impacting him?
Let me say this, and I've said this before, and it's when you win, you may not hear it as clear, but Dallas Goedert has never been a sudden or
that's true
tactful route runner.
Mm-hmm.
He's beat people with athleticism and speed and sometimes power at the top when it's a smaller guy. But he has never been a guy that's a route technician that's just going to line up and beat someone. If you give him a route, it's going to look pretty similar to something that you draw up. He's just bigger and more athletic than most of the guys that he's going against. Mm-hmm. When you have a guy like Cameron Curl, that's a guy that you pay to cover, and sometimes in big nickel is the guy that's in nickel is going to be a tougher challenge for him to get open on a guy like that. So with that being said, Clay Harbor is right, and he can take some time out to learn the tactful ways of running routes. I remember when Jeremy Maclin got to Kansas City, and me and him talked about it. He's like, man, I finally understood what you were trying to tell me when I was a rookie. And I didn't understand it until you left, when he had to be number one and when Deshaun and I left. And he had to learn how to play the game a different way. That's longevity, and Dallas Goedert's going to have to learn how to do that. So Clay Harbor is right, and it only happens when you got a guy that can cover tight ends.
Yeah, and Adam, we keep talking about there's going to be a game where it's going to happen. Where he can't be a 2 and 3 target guy in this offense too much longer. And don't let Tyler Higbee have 6 catches and 3 touchdowns today, and Dallas Goedert only have 2 catches and 20 yards. How it's been for him.
And look, they've got Jack Stoll to play inside as the Y. I mean, when he runs routes, we were told the first 2 or 3 games, Jeff, that there are 5 or 6 balls that should have actually gone to hit Goedert, and he didn't get it for whatever reason.
Right.
But the bottom line is, the other thing is they're paying him a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's something from a front office standpoint. They're going to be like saying, "Hey, why isn't this guy getting the football?" So it's an issue. But look, their offense took off last week. The passing game is what we were talking about, and I'm sure Goedert's role will grow. It has to.
Oh, can I add this? Because I don't think I mentioned it. Jalen Hurts, and we said at the beginning, he played the best, but his accuracy last week was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
There are some throws that Jalen had. The one third down, I believe, over the middle. They were running Panther. Front side, it was a post and a deep over, and they had a backside deep over by Dallas Goedert, who didn't get much separation. And literally the ball went past Cameron Curl's hand by maybe a centimeter. And Dallas Goedert caught that ball.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, remember that throw? That was an amazing throw.
I thought the throw to Zacchaeus too, right? On 3rd and 8, that got 11 was an excellent throw.
Yeah,
he
that
offset,
was side window throw.
He offset him to that side, right? It was the only place he can fit it into. He made that throw. Also, the AJ Brown, both of his sideline catches. One he was able to catch and run because he didn't slow down that much. The other one he got right over. It was cover 2. And what's the guy's name that got beat a million times? Forbes. Forbes got me. There was no flat defender, so when there's no flat defender in cover 2, you sink. And Jalen got that ball up and down before the safety can get there for the hit out of bounds, right? So those are some great plays by Jalen Hurts.
Definitely. By the way, when you said Forbes got beat a million times, I wasn't sure if you meant last Sunday or just a couple nights ago on Thursday, because it's been a rough 5-day stretch for Emmanuel Forbes, who I really like, by the way. I think, listen, I think he'll be fine. He's just taking his rookie lumps.
Yeah, DJ Moore just won the fantasy weekend. We didn't even start it yet. Yeah. What? I'm like, man, how does this work?
Yeah, DJ Moore. That all of a sudden the Bears just like, like the Undertaker meme where you're sleeping and you just wake up like, oh, that's the Bears right now.
that game is such a microcosm of the NFL. You think that you're in a position. We just played the NFC champions and played them close, and this team hadn't won a game all year, and boom, you're flatlined. That's how it is.
That is a great summation of how the NFL week to week needle is. All right, guys, let's finish this off. We'll get into our players to watch. We'll get into our picks. Then we'll get out of here and let everybody watch their football. Let's start with our player to watch segment today, or a player of the game, as we like to call it. I'll start with you, Jason. Who is going to be the player of the game?
Based on the tendencies and of our offense, we're going outside a bunch, and the guys that are getting the targets are the receivers. So I'm going to go with Devontae Smith. I'm going to change it up from AJ Brown to Devontae Smith. I think he's going to have a good game today. I don't think the corners that the Rams have are sufficient enough to guard either one of them.
Now, so this is sort of a matchup-based thing where you think that Devontae will be matched up against the lesser corner and therefore be a little bit more open, or just...
Yeah, we talked about, here's a matchup thing that I'm going for, is that Raheem Morris is going to muddy the lines inside. He's going to muddy the lines, blur the vision of Jalen Hurts, which is going to force him to go outside. And neither corner are on the level of Devontae and AJ Brown.
Gotcha. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, who do you believe will be the player of the game today?
Well, Jay took the words right out of my mouth. I feel exactly the same way, but I picked Jalen Hurts because I couldn't decide between Smith or Brown. So I just figure that it's going to be a good passing day. I think they're going to work outside the numbers, and I think they're going to have success.
All right. Adam, you have an interesting take on player of the game. Somebody we just spoke about needs to wake up or get his production due, right?
He does, yeah. So the Rams gave up 2 touchdowns to 2 different tight ends last week in their win. And I look at Goedert being more involved this week. It just has to happen. It shouldn't take this long. It's something they have to fix. It's one thing they have to clean up. Obviously, we point out the stuff for the player. The player's got to be better as well. This has got to be a Goedert game. If it's not, if you're going to tell me through 5 weeks it's been a non-factor, I just can't believe it. But it's happened so far through 4 games.
I've been waiting for the tight end screen to Dallas Goedert. That was one of my favorite plays the Eagles would run last year. He was so good at it. He would get skinny through the hole, as Jason would always say, do like a little basketball crossover, right? And then
we haven't seen that.
Yeah, we have not seen. Now, I know sometimes you're looking for the right style of defense, but I think you can pop a tight end screen as part of your offense once in a while. You don't have to get the one look, right, to pop that screen. It's a good play for them. So I don't know, maybe we'll see that this afternoon. And I am very convinced that Greg and Jay have been studying my script all week because we are all in lockstep. I also picked Devontae Smith to be my player of the game for much of the same reasons that you guys just mentioned, the matchup that they're going to see. I was going to pick one wide receiver. It's been AJ Brown for the last 2 weeks, and I feel like Devontae Smith will be his big game this week. Now, as the Eagles go out to play the Rams, who have been much better than people thought they would be, the Eagles are still 4-point road favorites. The 50.5 over-under makes me think that Vegas thinks that there's going to be some points scored in this game, that maybe both defenses are going to be stressed a little bit about that. So with that, we will get into our picks, and I will start with Jason. Who did you pick? What's the score?
Got the Birds winning. And I believe I got 30-21 or 31-20. I can't remember.
31-20. Yeah, you got a big cover and an over there.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, you're kind of on the whole, like the Eagles are much better from 1 to 53 than the Rams, and that should show up by the end of the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at the roster that the Rams have defensively, I don't know where most of those guys came from. I know Greg
certainly
knows,
weren't first round picks. We know that.
Michael Hecht, yes.
You're not on top of Christian Roseboom?
I know.
From South Dakota State?
There you go.
Yeah.
How do you have a rose boom and a note boom on the same team? That's hard to fathom. By the way, I can't not call that guy Joel Notebook the first time and then have to correct myself every time. So today I was able to do it. Greg, who wins this game? What's the score?
I believe I picked the Birds. Did I go 34-26?
You did go 34-26. So that's a 60-point total right there for you.
Well, again, the Eagles D-line could certainly be a dominating force, and it's certainly possible for Stafford to, throw a few picks, based on that. But I also think they're going to be able to make some plays in the pass game. So I'm going 34-26.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Adam, who do you think wins this game and by how much?
So I actually changed my scores from Friday. I made it.
I noticed that.
Yep. Eagles 30, Rams 23. I think this is a rare high scoring game for the Eagles in terms of me picking that. I usually don't do it, but I do. Last week we saw a lot of points scored. Conditions are obviously not a factor of games indoors, and there's just there plays to be made. Cooper Kupp coming back to me makes this a high scoring game, and the way that they'll be able to spread the Eagles out. But the one guy we didn't talk about is Keller Weatherspoon. He's been on 4 teams, tall corner. We're talking to someone who was with one of the teams he was with, who said, "Man, he's just so inconsistent." That's a guy the Eagles are going to go after today.
Yeah, he looks the part, but he's never really settled into being a good corner.
Yep.
I felt like the year, was it 1 or 2 years he was with Pittsburgh, where it almost looked like he was starting to come into it a little bit.
I believe it was last year.
Yes, because he played with San Francisco first, and then
Pittsburgh. Drafted by the Niners as a 3rd round pick out of Colorado.
Right. There was a stretch there in Pittsburgh where it started to feel like he was settling in and might be able to seize it, but as Adam just mentioned, it just was not able to hold. All right, so let the record show Adam has picked a high score, which he almost never does. He is going with the over, and your score, Adam, is actually higher than mine. This is definitely a rarity.
23, actually moved it up just when I knew for sure Kupp was going to play. Yep. And I'm just so interested to see how the side deploys the secondary against this offense who moves their players around a lot. This is going to be tough, but the Eagles are an incredible road team. Sirianni, best road record, 15-4 in the NFL since he became head coach. Pretty good.
All right. So far we got 3 Eagles wins, 3 Eagles covers, and all over. I'm going to finish out the clean sweep here with Eagles winning. I do believe they win 26-23. That, my quick math tells me, is a little bit under the 50.5, and it is not a cover, but it is an Eagles win, and they will go to 5-0 if we're all correct. If we're not, that's all right. We're still going to have an Inside the Birds post-game live.
Right.
So it's going to be myself, Adam Caplan, and, of course, Clay Harbor. We mentioned him, former Eagle tight end. So make sure you check out all the coverage of today's game immediately after, not just on Inside the Birds post-game live, but also from Andrew DeCecco, who is there in L.A., writing for us on insidethebirds.com. Big thanks, as always, to Ocean Casino Resort, MyBookie, Sky Motor Cars, PHL Sports Nation, our producers, James and Zach. We thank all of you so much for watching and joining us. For Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching another Inside the Birds pregame live.